Hello, everyone. Welcome to Thursday Night Writes. I just escaped a hurricane. I was living in Asheville, and I'm okay. My friends are okay, but it is crazy down there. And I'm going to ask, if you have the resources to give to charity, there are a lot of artists down there who are really suffering. And the entire River Arts District, including the gallery where I show my work, was completely wiped out. And so a lot of people have lost all of their revenue. And they're trying to raise $90,000, not only to rebuild the gallery, but also to continue to pay the artists the amount of money that they were making from selling their art. So I'm going to drop a link in the chat. There are lots of places to give. So if this is not your thing, give to somebody. But this link here, this is my gallery. I don't own this gallery. This is where I show, Trackside Studios. So if you can give, I would be incredibly grateful to you guys for doing that. Okay, so we are going to be talking today about metaphor in relation to our inner journey as the writer. Like, how do we discover our own metaphors as we write, and how do we use those metaphors to focus our writing? So I'm doing something I don't usually do. Well, you guys can't see because of my weird computer, but I'm breaking out a book. This is a book called The Starless Sea by Erin Morganstern. And if you love writing and you love stories, Erin Morganstern is one of the great new writers in that fantasy genre. Yeah, same writer as The Night Circus, that's right. So I want you to listen to the first line of this book. There is a pirate in the basement. The pirate is a metaphor, but also still a person. Now, this is not just one of the coolest opening lines of a book that I've read in a really long time. This is also one of the great writing lessons. Every single character you write is both a person and a metaphor. Every character in your script is a metaphor. Every single thing that happens in your plot is a metaphor. Every choice you make, every image you write, every little micro decision, every macro decision is a metaphor. Because real writing doesn't happen from the conscious part of your mind. Real writing happens from the subconscious part of your mind. And your subconscious mind does not communicate in literal, rational ways because it doesn't process in literal, rational ways. Your subconscious mind processes in metaphor. Things are symbolic. This is true if you've ever been in a relationship and you've ever had a fight about the dishes. You're not fighting about the dishes. The dishes are a metaphor. But the dishes are also dishes. Just like the pirate is a metaphor, but the pirate's also a person. So it's always not about the dishes, but it also always is about the dishes. If the dishes stop being dishes, we lose the feeling of reality. If the dishes stop being a metaphor, we lose the feeling of meaning. And screenwriting and most forms of writing work best when the character is both, or the plot element is both, or the image is both, or the line of dialogue is both. It's both a metaphor, and it's also a person, or a dish, or $1 million, or a heist, or a death, or whatever it is. Now, Allison's asking a very intelligent question. She's saying, is it a metaphor for the theme? I'm going to complicate that idea a little bit. Theme is the way our conscious mind names the metaphor. Theme is the way our conscious mind makes sense of this complicated metaphorical shit that the subconscious mind gives it. So every once in a while you get lucky But usually your subconscious mind doesn't go to your conscious mind. This is the theme that you want to explore, and this is what this all means. Instead, your subconscious mind is, I see a salmon on the table. Why is there a salmon on the table? I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. I see a pirate in a dungeon. Why is there a pirate in a dungeon? In fact, your conscious mind is likely to go, pirate, how cliche. Dungeon, how cliche. It's likely to reject that metaphor. Or if you've had the wrong kind of teacher and you've learned kill your darlings in the wrong way, or kill your darlings is valuable late in the process once you know the theme, but it's very dangerous early in the process. Your conscious mind might go, we gotta kill that salmon. It doesn't make any sense. Kill that pirate. It's one of my babies. I gotta kill it. It doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. When really that pirate or that salmon or whatever that random thing you just saw or heard or felt, that's the trail of breadcrumbs that is going to lead you to understand your theme and to one day be able to articulate your theme in a way that's clear, in a way that allows you to kill the right darlings, or in a way that allows you to make the hard choices. Usually, when new writers sit down to write, if they've taken like one class with not me, they often think they know exactly what they're writing. In fact, writers call us all the time and they talk to James and they go, I've already got it figured all out. I just have to write it. And that's how we know, oh, we're dealing with a real beginner here. We're dealing with someone who's at the very beginning of their journey. Because anybody who's been doing this for any amount of time knows that the moment you start writing, it doesn't come out the way you planned it. That the thing you thought was never going to work turns out to be the best thing in your script. That the thing you always thought was going to be obvious doesn't actually work at all. That the metaphor doesn't mean the thing you want it to mean, or that the person that you conceived as a metaphor is also a person who has their own dreams and their own desires and their own journey that doesn't have a damn thing to do with your plans. Let me give you an example of this from a movie that I really love. There's this beautiful film called There Will Be Blood. And There Will Be Blood is built around a dialectical structure. If you don't know what that means yet, that's okay. When you get to the masterclass, you will. Between two characters who are metaphors. We've got Daniel Plainview, who is a metaphor for capitalism. He's a walking metaphor for capitalism. Everything he says is capitalistic. He ends up trading his son for a brother. He has this incredible monologue at the end where he talks about, I drink your milkshake. He is literally the embodiment of early stage capitalism and late stage capitalism. The way that capitalism drinks its own milkshake, the way that capitalism ends up draining itself. He has this great line, I have a competition in me. I don't want other people to succeed. He's capitalism. But he's also a guy who wants family. He spends the whole first half of the movie barely only talks about business. And then his brother shows up and suddenly he's talking and waxing poetic. He's doing things that have nothing to do with capitalism when he talks to his brother. He also has this desire for, not just for the blood of oil, but for the blood of relation. For someone who can understand him. He's a metaphor, but he's also a person. Does that make sense? And allowing him to be a person often means writing stuff that has nothing to do with your thematic plan for him. That's just true because that's who he is. He's also a man who loves his son. He's also a man who's not always aware that he loves his son. Right? He's a complicated man who also happens to be a metaphor. If you allow him only to be a metaphor, he's going to feel fake and paper thin. If you allow him only to be a man, you're not going to know what the story means and what choices are right and which choices need to be changed or edited or which darlings you need to kill. Does that make sense so far? And by the way, there's a second character in the piece who's also both a man and a metaphor. Eli is a metaphor for church. Not the way there are people who have beautiful relationships with church, but I think we can agree that P.T. Anderson does not. So Eli represents church, and Daniel Plainview represents capitalism. But even though Eli represents church, and everything he does is in some way a relation to church, and he represents the blood of the Lamb, the blood of Christ, Eli's also a guy who has a complicated relationship with his dad, who hates his father. That's not very Jesus-like when he beats the crap out of his dad. He's also a guy who's invested in the stock market and is ambitious. He's also a guy who's near suicide when he loses. He's also manipulative. He has a lot of things that have nothing to do with church, because he's also a person, even though he's also a metaphor for church. Does that make sense to you all? So your conscious mind generally wants to understand how it's all going to work, how it's all going to fit together. It wants to go, this is what it means. This is the right choice. This is the wrong choice. Your subconscious mind, if it knew the answer, it wouldn't need to write the script. If it knew the answer, it wouldn't need to write the script. If it knew what your script was about, you wouldn't feel this drive. You feel this drive because there's something that you are subconsciously trying to make sense of, and you might not even know what it is. And for a lot of writers, this can lead to writer's block, because for a lot of writers, I don't know if you've ever had this feeling, but I know I certainly have. This feeling of, I know I have something to say, but I also don't know if I have anything to say. Have any of you guys ever felt that? I know there's something I have to get out of me, but I don't know if I have anything interesting to say. I don't know if I actually have something. I don't know if my writing actually matters. And our reaction to that is usually to go to the conscious mind, because we've been trained in a conscious mind-oriented society. Is to go make more sense of it, outline it better. Which formula do we need to fit this into? What's the right way to do this? What did this guru or that guru tell me I should do? What's supposed to happen at the end of Act 2? We get stuck. What does the hero's journey say? What archetype am I supposed to do? But what that ends up doing for a lot of writers is actually abstracting them from both sides. We lose both the metaphor and the person. And instead, the character becomes a puppet for a plot. So I'm going to say something radical to you guys. I'm going to say something a little wild. If you're brand new, if you haven't studied with me before, if you're old hat, you're like, that sounds like Jake. But if you're brand new, you might not have ever heard this idea before. Your plot doesn't frickin' matter. Your plot is necessary in order for you to understand the metaphor, and in order for the person to reveal themselves to you. Your plot is necessary for the metaphor to find a place of meaning, to find a place of shape, for the raw material of the metaphor you're wrestling with to come to some form of meaning that helps you understand the world a little bit better. And your plot is necessary so that your character can go on a journey in relation to that metaphor, which will eventually, once we understand it, can call our theme, right? Your plot is necessary to allow the character to change in relation to that metaphor and make sense of that metaphor in some way, or fail to for themselves. But your plot is not what matters. Your plot is just a means for both you and your character to find that place of change, of journey, of meaning. Does that make sense to y'all? A lot of teachers accidentally get in the way of this for their students. Richard chatted in early, your conscious mind is your English teacher. I'm lucky. I can honestly say that's not true for me because I was lucky to have a very wonderful English teacher early in my life. But for a lot of us, it really is because metaphor is taught wrong in most colleges, in most writing programs, because especially in screenwriting. In novel, you're much more likely to get a real novelist teaching you. But screenwriters are expensive, and most of them don't have PhDs, so colleges don't hire them. They don't write a lot of books on writing because you just make so much more money from a script than you do from a book. And most of the educational materials are not written by real writers. They're written by critics, by brilliant PhD students who potentially have never written a script in their life. And when we get taught symbols, when we get taught metaphor, it's usually reverse engineered. The writer is looking at this beautiful, finished, perfect script and going, see how the writer carefully threaded this perfect metaphor through the whole thing. See how the motif is set up from the very first page and played with. See how the symbol is established and then used and shifted to represent the character. And they're right. But they're backwards. Because the writer didn't start going, yeah, I know how this works. The writer started, I see a pirate. I don't know why I see a pirate. I see a pirate and I know they're a person and I also know they're a metaphor. But I don't know who they are yet. And I don't know what the metaphor means. Does that make sense? This gets compounded because then the teachers, if they're not good, those of you who have studied with our ProTrack mentors, most of them have gone through our program. They've been taught by me or by our best mentors how to teach. But a lot of people teaching screenwriting have zero education in teaching. They have great education in screenwriting, but they have zero education in teaching. And so what ends up happening is they try to offer helpful advice. They go, Addie, just make this happen. And Addie goes, oh my God, they're so smart. What a great piece of advice. Oh, Roy, what if this happened? And Roy goes, oh my God, what a great idea. Where have you been? I'm a Prudence. Just do it like this. And Prudence goes, yes, this is what I needed. And what Prudence and Addie and Roy maybe didn't realize is that they just jumped theme. That their subconscious mind was giving them this trail of breadcrumbs to follow. But now they're following somebody else's breadcrumbs. If you've ever been in an unmoderated writing group, this is true. Because you've left that writing group going, everybody's smarter than me and I don't know what I'm writing anymore. And that's usually because you've been barraged by 8 or 10 different people with 8 or 10 different themes, giving you 8 or 10 different ideas that are all good. But unless you know what the metaphor is, you don't know what is of this script and what is not of this script. And that is why in the early phase of writing, your job is not to kill your darlings. Your job is not to figure it out. Your job is to notice what the person does. Notice what she wants, where they carry pain in their body. Notice the choices they make. Notice the odd details your subconscious mind brings you to that you don't understand. Notice there's a salmon on the table. Notice, hey, I wrote this cliche, but it feels true. Actually accept whatever you see, feel, and hear. And get curious. What does it mean? I wonder what it means. I wonder what it's a metaphor for. How true to the metaphor do you stay? At the beginning, you don't worry about it. If sometimes she's a pirate and sometimes she's a shoplifter, great. But what you don't do is make her a shoplifter because somebody told you to. If you saw a pirate, she's a pirate. If you see a shoplifter, she's a shoplifter. If you see both, then the metaphor is something beyond that. Does that make sense to you all? Now, there are still hundreds of tools that we can apply to make this a faster process. There are tools of structure. There are tools of craft. There are tools of hook. There are tools of character. There are tools of dialogue. There are tools of image. There are so many different tools. There are tools of filmmaking. There's tools of secondary structure. There are so many tools that I can teach you that will make this faster. But that doesn't change what the actual job of being a writer is. The actual job of being a writer is recognizing that everything you see, hear, and feel is both a person and a metaphor, is both an object and a metaphor, is both a real thing and a metaphor. And that if you learn how to actually see, feel, and hear without censoring yourself, this radical act of trust will eventually lead you to understand what the metaphor actually is. What proceeds after this beautiful sentence, the pirate is a metaphor, but also still a person. What proceeds after that is 537 pages of some of the most beautiful, complicated, confusing storytelling you've ever seen. What Erin Morganstern ends up doing, she has 6 central metaphors that she's weaving through this piece, and it's really complicated what they are, and I would bet that as she's writing it, she doesn't even know it. There are 3 different fictional stories inside of the story that she's juggling, plus a journal. There is a real world and an imaginary world. And all the characters are both symbols for fate or time. There are cats, there are bees, there are owls, there's an owl peak. There are like 700 different freaking metaphors that are all swirling around. And what is exciting about reading this novel is you are feeling the writer trying to figure out what they all mean as she writes. And it's not until page 537 of the final draft of this piece that she finally puts it all together and says it to the audience and to herself. I'm going to read that to you right now. If you haven't read The Starless Sea and you don't want to know what it all means, you can plug your ears. And I'll give you a thumbs up when I'm done spoiling. Here's where it ends up. Endings are what gives stories meaning. I don't know if I believe that. I think the whole story has meaning. But I also think to have a whole story-shaped story, it needs some sort of resolution. Not even a resolution. Some appropriate place to leave it. A goodbye. I think the best stories feel like they're still going somewhere, out in story space. I remember wondering if this story was an analogy about people who stay in places or relationships or whatever situations longer than they should because they're afraid of letting go or moving on or the unknown, or how people hold on to things because they miss what the thing was, even if that isn't what that same thing is now. Now, I'm going to give a thumbs up for anyone not listening. Do you see what she did now? What's amazing, she creates a whole journal entry that she threads through here just so she can share this with you. Just so she can share what it actually means. She finds an organic way to tell you what all this means. And even as she says, I promise you that's her own journal, going, what the hell does this mean? What am I actually saying? What is this actually about? What story am I actually telling here? She gives that to a character. The book is 574 pages long. She doesn't tell us what it means until page 537. because she doesn't frickin' know until page 537. And that is what is so beautiful about reading this book. You feel that high wire act. Now, most likely in the first draft, this didn't happen on page 537. This happened on page like 1037. And then she used that knowledge to go back through and revise everything, give shape to it, adjust it, go, this is about this, not about that. This scene needs to go. This scene needs to stay. This is the journey of being a writer. This radical act of truth, this radical act of trust in yourself, this acceptance that you, not only do you not know, but you're not supposed to yet. And this trust that if you just keep applying the craft, if you just keep applying the tools, that eventually you're going to figure out what it all means, as long as you don't take advice from people who don't know what they're doing. So we're going to end today with a writing exercise. Here's your exercise. We're going to take 7 minutes. And you're not going to journal, and team, I'm changing this a little bit to just clarify it. You're not going to write for 7 minutes nonstop. You're going to write for 7 minutes nonstop, but you're not going to write for 7 minutes nonstop about what it is, because you probably don't know yet. Instead, for 7 minutes, you're going to journal about what the central metaphor might be. You're going to journal about what this piece might actually be about. And if you think you know what it's all about, try to get underneath that. What might it be about that's even more profound than you're already aware of? Even deeper, even more emotional, even scarier, even more beautiful, even more ugly, even more complicated. So you have 7 minutes. Team, I will chat that in since I just changed it on you. And you can start now. All right. Raise your hand if you learned something that you didn't know before. Awesome. If you would like to share, you can click reactions and then raise hand to share one of these. And while we wait for those hands to go up, first off, I'm going to drop that link in again for any of you who would like to support Trackside Studios. I'm also going to tell you a little bit about my Write Your TV series class. It's a 4-week class. We study the greatest TV shows of all time, comedy, dramedy, limited series, drama, everything in between. We're going to learn how to write Bibles and pilots by studying these great pieces. And then we're going to take all those lessons and put it together in order to write a Bible and the beginnings of a pilot for your own script. The class also includes a one-on-one consultation with one of our ProTrack mentors, a professional writer who will meet with you, sit down with you for 45 minutes, read 10 pages of your writing, and just talk to you about your own script and your own writing and how to apply these concepts to your own stuff.